Hello, this is D.E.Snyder for Wide Awake News this Tuesday, the 24th of June, 2014. For those of you late to the party, the last 2 weeks I've discussed at some length the reasons why Americans living outside of the U.S. have given up and abandoned their U.S. citizenship, their passports, and vowing never to return to U.S. soil. For those of you who don't know, once an American has given up their U.S. citizenship and their passports, the U.S. and the IRS can still hunt them down and hound them for 10 years. For those who can afford it, there's a $10,000 exit fee that expedites this IRS loss of privilege. But for many others, just being out of the U.S. and free of the matrix is enough. I'm opening today's show with this recap because it's important to acknowledge this exodus of U.S. citizens, precisely because it's not something that you're going to hear about on Fox News. And because, interestingly enough, I've had loads of emails from Americans who have left and have heard my show, and some emails from those still in the U.S. wishing that they could leave and asking for advice and lots of questions regarding the process to leave the matrix and the U.S., and even a few spiteful emails, of course, from Americans living in America saying, good riddance to me, because I did leave. Well, of course, it takes all time, and I'd like to point out that I'm not an American, although I've lived most of my adult life in America. I raised a family there. I opened and operated several businesses, paid my taxes, volunteered my time at schools, public libraries, school libraries, bake sales, cheerleading squads, you name it, I did it, and was enormously invested in the community that I was living in. Ultimately, of course, I chose to leave because I had that choice. And while I detest Americans' internal politics and where it's taken the American people and myself and my grown children, and where it's leading, I have many American friends and colleagues who I love dearly and respect who have supported my decision to leave. Of course, that brings me to our international politics. And I say ours because I acknowledge that, I had lived in the United States for almost 3 decades. Ultimately, I couldn't raise a second family under this Common Core, Obamacare, Feinstein, Pelosi, Harry Reid, McCain, Kerry Clinton, Bush, Obama, Sandy Hook, Batman Theater, Boston bombing, Ruby Ridge, Oklahoma City, Bay of Pigs, 9/11, Al-Qaeda, ISIS, Libya, Egypt, Iraq, Syria, what else is there? FDA, CDC, EPA, the Federal Reserve, the food stamp poverty, the Grand Central Station where McDonald's, malls, and sitcoms rule the masses, where 90%, if not more, roll up their sleeves on yet another hocus-pocus government-sanctioned biological warfare vaccine designed to destroy the immune system and alter the genomic material, and where 90%, if not more, still insist on believing that there's an aisle that separates somehow the left from the right, Republicans from Democrats, and where 90%, if not more, still believe that they have freedom of speech, they still believe their opinion or their vote counts, and where there are far, far too many people who actually believe the political rhetoric that America is not to blame for the current faction fighting in the Middle East or the mayhem and death of innocents in Libya and the losses sustained by the American people in the form of their youth, sent off to war in far-off lands, not to protect life and liberty of Americans at home, but to create profit for private corporations and secure the oil and mineral rights for global corporate entities that have no loyalty to the American people or any people for that matter. Corporations are not people. They are fictitious entities. Yet in today's America, corporations have more rights than flesh and blood humans. Ultimately, I couldn't, in good conscience, live in a country that is willing, indeed desperate, to drone for peace. It's an oxymoron. And the biggest moron in this fiasco is the puppet king, the disbarred lawyer and questionable U.S. citizen, the pickaninny Barack Hussein Obama and his equally odorous wife, Michelle Obama. And before anyone calls me a racist, let me clarify that the pickaninny should never have been given the Nobel Peace Prize ahead of any meaningful action, and that all of his actions while in office should have solicited a demand for the return of the Nobel Peace Prize. And the lack of such has rendered the Nobel Peace Prize a worthless prize indeed. Furthermore, I don't pin this jackal to the wall because of his color, but because of his treasonous job performance. Likewise, Attorney General Eric Holder, for shame on them and for shame on you, America, for allowing these despicable and deplorable creatures to continue to hold office. One cannot drone for peace. You cannot lie, cheat, steal, and obfuscate the truth, and allowing people who do to hold high office makes a mockery of any standards or ethics whatsoever. What they do, all of these names that I've mentioned, what they do in the name of you, the people of America. So that's my rant, going back over the last 2 shows. And I want to thank all the people, of course, that emailed me. Obviously, there are a lot of people that share my sentiments. There are a few who do not, and they equally have voiced their opinion to me. For those of you who've emailed me and not yet gotten a response, please be patient. There's just one of me, and there were rather a lot of you the last 2 weeks. On that note, I'd like to bring out my guest. You know her well. While I was in the process of moving lock, stock, and barrel from the United States to Costa Rica, my good friend K.Q.Tostado held on to my slot for me and filled it with lots of wonderful guests. And indeed, today she's going to join me. We recently did a United We Strike marathon, which is the second Saturday of every month. And we had a guest speaker on the show. And if you haven't, I suggest and I recommend that you tune in every second Saturday of the month to the United We Strike platform. We have wonderful people that are there continuously, and we have a revolving door of guests. And this particular guest solicited a rather strong response from myself and some of the other more permanent hosts on the program. And I thought that it would probably be a good idea for us to tease this particular issue out and talk about it. And so I'd like to welcome K.Q.Tostado to the show. Karen, are you there?
I'm here, Dinah. It's real nice to have you back. Thank you for asking me to join you tonight.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for being here. I appreciate it immensely. It's been one of those crazy times where, for all that I love Costa Rica, I got to tell you, they sure do have problems keeping their Wi-Fi signals up and running continuously. They seem to fall off the platform all the time, so I wasn't even sure if I'd be able to run the show today. So hopefully I managed to stick with it.
I understand. Well, your volume was a little low to begin with, but it's better now. I think Todd's paying attention back there. They're doing a good job producing. So I can hear you fine. I just miss you not being on Skype because it's easier to chat also during the breaks. But anyway.
Yeah. But anyway, how about you introduce a little bit more about the topic that solicited this reaction from some of us on the last United We Strike. Let's talk about the guest that we had and his book a little, and then let's just start talking about the real issues.
Well, it's Kevin Galilei, and I very much admire the work he's done in terms of uncovering how they are doing their best to depopulate. And he's got real good evidence that way. You know, he can break it down, the fluoride, the chemtrails, all kinds of different areas that he gets into. But the one area that I just cannot... I can't go along with is that he sincerely believes that the only way to curb, to save the planet is to enforce a Chinese-style two-child policy and to do it, the sooner the better, and that there are too many of us, and he says that we're growing food on every square acre of the planet and it just can't hold us anymore, and we've got to focus on this as the main thing because this is what's really... threatening our world is the fact that there are way too many of us, and so we've got to start reining it in immediately. And he believes also that once we do that, we should continue to listen to the UN, those great guys who've done a hell of a job so far. You can look at our world, but he thinks that they did that with benevolent intentions to try and cull the population, because after 1945, they didn't want to have any more wars, so they figured that in order to promote peace, this is what they had to do. And, there are parts of that make sense because according to some of the research I've done, Myron Fagan, who has a great speech that he put out in 1967. There's a link on UnitedWeStrike.com. On the documentary page, you can listen to him talk about it, and you can also go to my blog page and you can get a link to the documentary. You can also get a link to the transcript. And he talks about the Illuminati being set up way back in 1760 and how Albert Pike was a successor to Adam Weishaupt, and they want World War III. I mean, this is all part of their plan. The Rockefellers are the ones who donated the UN anyway. And then, you know, the UN creates the Council on Foreign Relations. You can listen to Hillary Clinton go down and talk about how she gets her walking orders from them, and she's so grateful to do so. So you've got all these alphabet gangs in the mix. You got the bankers in the background. We've already been nuked. I mean, he talks like, and again, I like him personally, but he speaks like they've been doing us a favor, and it's been necessary to do this covertly. So his big deal is he wants it to be overt, two-child policy, and if it weren't for him, nobody would be talking about it because nobody knew anything before he started to talk about it. I was on a program with him on
that was actually radio. One of my big sticking points with him was this little grandiose in the approach. But this is not to bash Kevin. I mean, he has a great book out, and he also went on a hunger strike outside the Vatican. And I came late to that party because I'd been gone for several weeks. I think that we could just start talking about some of these things right there, because this is one of the things that tends to drive me crazy, and it did drive me crazy about living in the States. America is this very vast land, and it's a very beautiful land, and it's very diverse, and you can really equate the states of America with the whole of the EU. If you imagine that all the states of America are different countries because they're all uniquely different, the landscape is different, the weather is different, the accents of the people are different. It would always crack me up when people would point out my accent, because I go to Texas and I hear their accent. You know, to go to Louisiana, you hear their accent. To go to LA, you hear theirs. Everyone has their unique sound, and yet, I was the outsider and the foreigner. But ultimately, we share a currency, and the same stuff is on the grocery store shelves. You have the same strip malls, McDonald's everywhere, Subway everywhere, Burger King, Coca-Cola, Pepsi, you name it. It's the same in every state. And so Americans are very isolated for all that they may travel within the continental U.S. And if you look at the statistics, a vast number of them do not travel. It's a relatively small number of Americans that travel even within their own borders. And that breeds a certain ignorance of the greater world. So when you travel and when you talk to Europeans, they have a much broader sense of their place in the scheme of the bigger picture. Because from anywhere in Europe, you can take a train and pass through several countries in a day or two if you go on the fast trains. And so they're inundated with other culture, other language, other foods. Up until the euro, it was other currencies. And that breeds a tolerance and an exposure that Americans have really lacked to their deficit. Because also when you travel, you realize, if you're looking around, you realize that all places are not equally populated, and all cultures and all people do not have the same values. They do not buy their groceries the same way. They don't stock their kitchens the same way. They don't eat the same foodstuffs. They don't present things the same way. And so, America comes with a very narrow perception of what the world has to offer to their deficit. So when Kevin talks about one of the points that he raised, and I'm sure this is something that he raises in his book, which I haven't read, is this idea that every person on the planet needs to reduce their footprint. And every square inch of the planet not occupied by human flesh is under the toil of growing food and produce is the most ridiculous, outlandish, and preposterous suggestion, which he says as fact. He doesn't make it as a vague statement. This is a profound fact that he stated over and over during the marathon, and it really irked me. And it's one of the reasons why I really wanted to talk about this today. And of course, Kevin's not here to defend himself, so perhaps I'll have to have him as a guest on my show. Although, of course, you had him as a guest on your show the Friday before, correct?
I did. Well, and because I wasn't able to join the roundtable the month before. So, let's see, June, in May. And when I listened to the ending roundtable, I was not happy, and it's the first time that that's ever happened, because I all of a sudden realized that with all of his brilliance, he's really a eugenicist, and he's advocating that we cull the population. And in my opinion, that's the very last thing we need to be worried about. I mean, we've already been nuked. Anyone here is lucky if they're healthy, if they can bear healthy children. I think that's a plus as well. And we need to focus on healing and some of the real things instead of pointing our fingers at each other. We're overpopulated by the militant industrial complex, by the traitors in the Senate and the Congress, and, you know, people with titles and badges and banners and all the rest of it, instead of getting down to the basics of self-ownership, cooperation, non-aggression, honorable defense, and moral stewardship, which, if we embrace those qualities, which have nothing to do with money, we could immediately turn our situation around and go local, because what we need to do is make sure that we've got clean air and healthy food and self-sufficient communities, and to love ourselves enough, you know, to face the fact that we've been so screwed up, and we also need to clean up our water. And none of that's being done now. We're all following, you know, and for Kevin to say that, you know, to trust the UN, and he says, it's the task of this article to reveal the silent, offensive, secret methods and insidious means which make up the world's greatest con, so that an awakening to the dire realities we face will prompt each and every human being on Earth to demand a share of the responsibility, and population control can be legislated across the globe with little or no resistance for the next 3 generations, or until our numbers are sufficiently low to allow humanity to live in balance with nature and at peace with itself. This is the only way our future, or the only way our children will have a future and a life of dignity. And so I can't really read his books because I just get irritated every other paragraph.
Right. Well, and so, you know, you sent me some of that, and then I listened to what he was saying. And, of course, we were all very civil at our round table, and we go around the round table with a topic, and everyone says their piece. And, gosh, all I wanted to do was jump in and jump across the table and shake the man. So, Kevin, if you're out there, consider yourself shaken, not stirred. Because it's a bunch of bullshit. I'm sorry. I don't even know if I'm allowed to say that word on the radio. But it's this higher speak that is utterly meaningless. And what it shows is just an incredible ignorance for the landscape of the greater world around us, beyond the borders of America and beyond the borders of the UN. Because anyone who, no matter what you are saying, no matter what message you have, if a part of your message is, and no matter how good your data is, because I've been told now by several people that some of his data is pretty good, but no matter how good your data is, and no matter what else you bring to the table, if you are also promoting the UN as a feel-good agency and someone or an entity that has the best interest of the human population of this world, if it's holding it up to a higher standard, and if you think the UN is trying to protect humanity, then everything else that you bring to the table is a wash, because the UN is an incredibly insidious and dangerous organization, and really is the headquarters of what we commonly talk about as the New World Order. And I really hate that word, the New World Order. I mean, you can go on YouTube and you can hear, Barack Hussein Obama, Clinton, Bush, all of them repetitively use the words New World Order ad nauseum. But really, we should be saying one central government that's going to, govern all the countries and all the people of the world under a set of common standards, common trade agreements, common currency, and it does away with everything that we as a species hold dear. I'm going to let the ads go, and we'll be back after the break.
Oxygen. It's nature's oldest therapy and plays an essential role in destroying viruses, bacteria, mold, yeast, and fungus, and keeping the human body healthy and strong. Now, you can give your body and your immune system a mega boost of disease-fighting oxygen with all-natural Oxy-C. With so many people now leading a sedentary indoor lifestyle, most are in a chronic state of oxygen deprivation, which sets up a perfect environment for disease, general fatigue, and a host of other symptoms. Oxy-C is yours in simple, convenient capsules. Nothing to mix, nothing to hassle with. Take it with juice or water anytime. Feel a cold or flu approaching? Have no energy or spark anymore? Try all-natural Oxy-C and prepare to be amazed. Oxy-C is only available from New Earth Health Solutions at rinse.com. Look for the New Earth banner at rinse.com.
Hi, this is Richard Ostro, owner for Carnivora Research International. I will be hosting a webcast to occur on Wednesday, June 25th at 7:40 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This will be a question and answer session for questions we can answer legally in the United States. Tune in to www.carnivora.com to view the video that we will upload at 7 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time entitled, Can Immune Modulation Heal the Body? Presented by Dr. Robert Rowan, M.D. Then join our free U.S. and Canadian webcast by calling 1-888-694-9666. That's 1-888-694-9666. Visit us at carnivora.com or dial 1-866-VENUS-FLY. Protect yourself and your family during these challenging times. Call 1-866-VENUS-FLY today.
Scientists in England have succeeded in stabilizing the time-honored substance in garlic that destroys harmful bacteria, viruses, molds, yeast, and fungus. This all-natural microbe killer is called Allicin C, and it's now available to you in 100% vegetarian capsules only on the New Earth page at rinse.com. This powerful broad-spectrum antimicrobial agent is harmless to friendly bacteria and has been concentrated to equal an astonishing 35 cloves of garlic in each vegetarian capsule. Think about it. The antibacterial, antiviral strength of 35 odorless cloves of garlic in just one capsule. Allicin C is so effective it even destroys superbug MRSA in test after test. Allicin C is truly an incredible advance in natural medicine, and with the threats of bacterial and viral diseases and pandemics growing, no home should be without it. Learn more and order Allicin C on the New Earth page at rinse.com.
All right. Well, I'm not sure what happened to my buddy Dinah Everett-Snyder. She should be there. Maybe she dropped out.
Here I am.
Okay. Well, it's your show.
Okay.
Honey, back to you.
Well, of course, we've been hashing out this whole thing about the UN being really evil and insidious. Of course, as we really do know this, and I want to just keep going. I don't want to keep going back and bringing the latecomers up to speed. You can find the show archived over at rinse.com, and of course you can go to Wide Awake News and find it there, or hopefully you're listening live right now. But I want to talk specifically about this notion that we all have this enormous footprint as we make our way through our lives and live on this planet. Because I think that's incredibly important for people to understand. Earlier in the show, I had my little, 10-minute rant Peroni, and I mentioned that, of course, corporations are not people, although corporations are made up of people. Corporations are fictitious entities, but in today's world, corporations have all the power, and the humans, flesh and blood humans, have little to none. And all you have to do is look at a place like Africa. Nestle controls an enormous amount of the water resources in Africa. 70% of Africa's water is not owned by the people of Africa. Under Obama's Droning for Peace program, under the UN, they went in and bombed Libya to free Libya from oppression. And in the process of freeing Libya from oppression, the very first bombs that were dropped, or drone bombs that were dropped, managed to hit the water pipelines that bring water not only to the far-flung corners of Libya, but the borders beyond Libya for farming and agriculture and for people as drinking water. Those things have still not been repaired, and now those things do not belong to the Libyan people. So for someone like Kerry, and I want to just put this out there because Kerry just the other day made an utterly ridiculous statement when he said that it is not the fault of America, this drama and unfolding of political strife in the Middle East and Libya. And he managed to say that with a straight face, this silly inbred little man. And it's patently not true. And the fact that he could say that with a straight face goes to all the other things that he and his ilk say with a straight face. So you have all these countries that don't own their water resources, that have to pay. You have Nestle, who comes out and says that water is a commodity like every other commodity, and that people do not have an inherent right to water. So it is a controlled scarcity. The food, land across the entire continent of Africa, they are very distinctive areas of Africa that are fertile and able to support agriculture. And those areas that can support agriculture produce an enormous amount of food. But what has happened is corporations have come in, pushed the people off the land, and taken a hold of all of these agricultural lands, and instead of growing food for the local populations and whatever surplus there is using for export, the vast majority of these fertile lands are being used to grow biofuels. Biofuels. That means there is no food for the local populations, who are now displaced populations, because these corporations have taken away their traditional lands, their traditional agricultural lands. So now you have all these corporations growing biofuels in Africa, which then have to be exported using more oil and diesel and gas to export them, to refine them, export them to America, the Middle East, China, and Europe. And so we talk constantly about these poor people in Africa and all of these derogatory terms about how there's too many of them and we need to get rid of some of them and they need to stop breeding like flies. And it's incredibly irksome because it goes to a general ignorance and malaise of people who are not willing to do the research, and a horrible, insidious nature of our mainstream media who lack the integrity to communicate these concepts over the night news. So you can see the same drivel on public TV and Fox News and CNN and all this other rubbish constantly repeated over and over and over on every single channel, but nothing of importance. And this is important because we do not all have the same footprint.
What they're doing also here in the States is we're having a huge immigration problem now where babies are coming in, where a lot of young men and women who are picked up from Mexico, but some of them are not Mexicans, they're from Guatemala and other countries, And all of a sudden, we're just being hit with these immigrants who are left and at bus stations and things like that. And it's really against. It's not humane treatment. Period. You know, I'm hearing about babies who are left too, just young children. So part of what's going on is to make us think that we're overpopulated instead of looking at us, understanding that, you know, we don't really care so much about the lines that people draw for borders, but we want to live in our homes where we grow up with our families. And these corrupt governments are making it not able to do that. And my husband thinks that these young men and women who are of draft age, who are the immigrants, are specifically being brought over here so they can be the new recruits into the militant industrial complex, because they won't have a problem firing on Americans if they get amnesty and, you know, they get to be citizens.
Well, I mean, that's really interesting. But, you know, historically, Karen, when you look at the voting demographics of people in the United States, overwhelmingly, the Hispanic communities, Hispanic population is interested and will vote on local issues, very local to them, and they'll vote on things that affect them directly. But they have absolutely no interest in foreign policy. At the think tank several years ago, we started really teasing this data out. And it's very, very interesting that as states become saturated with Hispanic populations, and bearing in mind that California, I believe, is now the vast majority of their voting population is Hispanic. But across all the different states, as the Hispanic vote goes up, the vote on bigger picture issues in the United States goes down. And they have absolutely no interest in foreign policy. They're much more vested in things that directly affect them. So it's a very, very easy way to neutralize a voting population, bearing in mind, of course, that the whole voting system is rigged and it's all hocus pocus too. But you can play with those numbers quite significantly, even at the local level, with an amenable population.
Well, you know, Hispanic people traditionally as well are Christians, so they're taught to obey, to pray, to bend down on their knees for, you know, His ass holiness, and to have as many children as humanly possible. It's not
true, and they also, and this of course is not a Hispanic bashing thing, but I think it's important that, you know, we talk about these very real issues and stop having this knee-jerk reaction to political correctness. And so, you know, I think at the expense of perhaps offending a few sensitive souls, it really is time to put all of these things on the table and talk about them as honestly as we're able. And one of the things that, of course, comes out of the data that I've done in the past is with Hispanic communities, they are very vested in programs that benefit them, like food stamps and free school lunches and free bus programs. And once you've got a population hooked on that, they're going to vote for the status quo. Here are the ads. We'll be right back.
When you think of getting old, what comes to your mind? Spending the last years of your life in a nursing home? Staring out a window? Medicated to keep you docile? Not able to recognize your own kids? Suffering with some dreaded disease until you die all alone? Well, think again. One of the premier doctors in the world, Dr. James Forsythe, wrote the book Anti-Aging Cures. Life-changing secrets to reverse the effects of aging. Your key to the real fountain of youth. And Suzanne Summers, the perpetual face of eternal youth, wrote the foreword. As mentioned in the book, Royal Velvet is the most cost-effective, easiest, and complete way to reverse the effects of aging. It's true. So, do you want glowing skin, less wrinkles, thicker hair, less gray hair, your hormones balanced, improved memory, a toned physique, greater energy, less pain and stiffness, as well as benefits too numerous to name? Go to RoyalVelvetNow.com. Click on the rinse icon in the upper right-hand corner, and within a couple of days, you can be on the path to youthful living. RoyalVelvetNow.com. Your life will never be the same.
Charlie McGrath of WideAwakeNews.com here with a question from my friends at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion. What do they know that we don't? Insiders and a who's who list of elite have made it crystal clear that we are headed for catastrophe, putting out warning after warning, urging people to batten down the hatches. Billionaire George Soros has recently been dumping stocks and at the same time acquiring millions in gold. In fact, in a recent interview, he was quoted as saying, "I'm not here to cheer you up. The situation is as serious and difficult as I've experienced in my career." Out of control government deficit spending and a Federal Reserve that's only solution seems to be print more fiat currency will lead to a weaker dollar and massive inflation on necessity items such as energy and food. If you have wealth to protect, please visit my friends at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion. Gabe Elton and the folks at Austin Rare Coins and Bullion have many Wide Awake News customers because they're honest, they're fair, and they won't sell you paper promises or product they do not have. Call Gabe Elton at 800-552-4109. That number again, 800-552-4109, or visit them online at austincoins.com.
Make a promise, take a vow, and trust your feelings, it's easy now. Understand the voice within and feel a change already beginning. Oh, you tell me again. Oh, can you feel it?
I'm on. Hey, this is D.E.Snyder back again with my friend K.Q.Tostado, talking about, I guess, a whole bunch of stuff. You know, Karen, something that I've talked about on my shows in the past has been this whole paradigm of prosperity and what a farce it is. Because in that way, we all live under the auspices of a controlled scarcity of resources. Under this paradigm of prosperity, of course, we're all pigeonholed, and our little boxes get smaller and smaller, and everyone gets more specialized. And we're told that this is progress, and that we have prosperity because we have this big cardboard palace, and we have a new car and a mortgage, and, you know, ever-increasing debt. And this is driven home to us in so many different ways, this accumulation, and got to have more and bigger and more, and the latest, and yet the latest. And it's a disease in of itself, and it's not prosperity at all. It's a paradigm of scarcity, and it's a scarcity of humanity, of soul, of ethics, of reality. But we as first world countries, by and large, have bought into this, and it's time to put on the brakes. I mean, it's long past due to put on the brakes, but it goes to something else, that I talk about, which is the 7 deadly sins: lust, greed, gluttony, sloth, wrath, envy, and pride. And we've rolled all of these into this conundrum that we perceive as being okay, and they're really not. And under this, we're all eating each other alive as we claw at each other to function in this perception of prosperity. What do you say about that?
Yeah, we're definitely programmed. And it was scary today, and I don't remember his name. Now, if you remember, but he talked about how they're really training us for the future with Jesse Shell, talking about the nightmare of the future and how we're going to be so programmed into following where we get our rewards from. Like, you wake up in the morning and your toothbrush is sensitive and knows how long you should be brushing your teeth. And if you actually do it for that long, you get X amount of points. No. And he talks about if you, they can tell what you've been reading as well. If you read the government propaganda newspaper, you'll get more points for that. You'll get more points if you play, everything is kind of a game that you will, it's like B.F. Skinner and stuff, and the Pavlovian dog will just be trained to be better people, because if we do our homework and we do our dishes or we do exercise, we'll get so many points, and they'll add up, and then you can get bonus points. And it was a very frightening deal. I'll put that in the chat room too, because it's a whole different way
starting to look at the things that are going on that we don't always pay attention to because we're so caught up in the false scarcity and in all of this insanity without really stopping long enough to reclaim our morality. We are letting ourselves be run to death by the psychopaths who are murdering at their pleasure. And we still do it. And we let them, persecute the veterans when they come home. And then we have to fight with people who say there are too many of us, It's crazy.
Right. Well, what the thing that you talk about is sort of Pavlov's dog is interesting because it goes to this whole Bitcoin and money-less transfers and transactions where no real money, no tangible money is changing hands. And that's something that, the scientific community and the quasi-thinking community has talked about since before Bitcoin came out. But when the prospect of Bitcoin first emerged, we all took a look at this sort of new reality, and it's a really horrific landscape. And it's been very gently introduced, and it's very alive and well now. In our first world American landscape. You look at all the apps that you have for your phone, and if you eat at this restaurant, you get points, and if you write something about them and you let people know where you are, you get these social media points, and the restaurant gets to tap into that, and the companies, of course, that have sprung up that now read all that data and translate it for companies to improve their customer satisfaction and, all of this other stuff. Well, what those are the precursors to exactly that Pavlovian landscape that you mentioned. So for those people that shake their heads and say, well, you're jumping the gun or you're being an alarmist, know this. That is the future. Then that has been set in motion. So if you have a 4G phone and you have any of these social media apps on there, you have already bought in and are playing to the program. Most people don't realize that, as you say, because they're too busy living in the immediate world of day-to-day trying to put food on the table and pay their mortgage. So I'd like to talk a little bit about food because the other thing that irked me with Kevin was this idea that the whole world that's not, occupied by human bodies is filled with growing enterprise. And it's utter rubbish. All you have to do is travel across Europe, go into Germany and travel across the landscape, and you see huge swaths of land that have very little human footprint on them. And increasingly, sadly, very little organic and or heirloom food being grown on them, because more and more across the entire globe, genetically modified foods have made inroads. And no matter your stance on the actual science of genetically modified foods, what happens in the farming industry when you are farming genetically modified foods is an utter shitstorm for the human body and everything else. The mycelium in the soil are killed. Insect life is destroyed. If you get down on your hands and knees on a farm anywhere today, be it in Europe, be it in Africa, be it in the United States, if you get down on your hands and knees and you crawl around on the farm, you will not see insects. You don't see bugs. You don't see anything. Farmers have to feed their chickens with feed that comes in bags that has to be produced. It has to be grown. It has to be milled. It has to be pressed. It has to be packaged. It has to be trucked, and you have to buy it. And all of these things use resources to produce. And then you come to a place like Costa Rica where it's teeming with life. I walk out into my garden, and there are several different kinds of grasshoppers, lots of different crickets, caterpillars, centipedes, worms, earthworms. Life just abounds. And the reason is we don't have a whole lot of genetically modified foods here yet. And as a result, we don't have all the pesticides and herbicides chronically associated was the farming practices of genetically modified foods. This doesn't even scratch the surface of the issues with genetically modified foods themselves, but just the farming practice. And so and I urge listeners to Google what glyphosates do to the endocrine system, how they feminize fish, feminize amphibians and other animals in the environment, in our natural biological environment. And by definition, if they're doing that to our environment, they are doing things to us. And the science is there, and it's easily found on the web. So while we have the web, because I know that your free choices on the web are also coming to an end. Under the Trans-Pacific Pact Alliance, the web is going to become highly regulated. You're not going to be able to access the things that have been free up until now, and it's all being done through backdoor enterprise and backdoor handshakes and agreements that we, the people of the world, have not been privy to and have not voted on, and no doubt would not agree to. So while the web is free and this information is at your fingertips, please take the time to Google what glyphosates do to the human body and the endocrine system, how they change your fertility for men and women, how they alter your genomic material, how they create disease. And then while you're at it, please have a look at what happens in the human body when you eat genetically modified foods. And then while you're looking at genetically modified foods, type into your search engine chemtrails. Go to YouTube and look at some of Deborah Tavares' fantastic stuff that she's been doing research with chemtrails and Wi-Fi signals. And go to Dane Wiggins' site, which is Karen, help me here.
Geoengineeringwatch.org, I think.
Yeah, geoengineeringwatch.org. He has a plethora of fantastic articles, hardcore data, and chemtrails are real. I still bump into people that don't think that chemtrails are real. They are absolutely real. Aluminum is raining down on us from our skies. And aluminum in the soil inhibits the growth of plants. And it's no coincidence that Monsanto, Dow, DuPont, Syngenta have all patented aluminum-resistant seeds that are sitting in food banks and seed vaults waiting until that time when nothing that the heirloom-favoring community wants to grow will grow. So for those of you who think that we should just limit genetically modified organisms or just label this shit, understand this. There is going to come a day in the very, very near future, within the next 5 to 10 years, where your heirloom seeds are not going to grow in the soil. And they're not going to grow in the soil because the soil is saturated with aluminum from chemtrails, amongst other things. It's a biological warfare is what chemtrails is. And your seeds, no matter how good they are, no matter how well you've stored them, and no matter how much you paid for them, and how well you have grown them in the past, they simply will not grow. And at that time, the food chain is under the control of people who will dictate your every single waking moment, sleeping moment, forever. And there is no going back. This is the biggest problem. There is no going back from genetically modified foods in open fields. There's no going back from allowing chemtrailing to dump this aluminum in our soils and on our bodies. I did a test 2 years ago on my neighbors, my children, and myself, and there was no difference in the contamination of the human body from chemtrails between a 2-year-old and an 87-year-old. So if you're alive, you have been exposed and you are contaminated. I think that's the end of the show, and I think I didn't give Karen nearly enough time to talk. I'm so sorry. I'm a habitual overspeaker. Thank you so much for joining us. I'll see you next week. Good night.
best away. It's ironic. At times like this you pray, but a bomb blew the mosque up yesterday. There's bombs on the buses, bikes, roads, inside your market, your shops, your clothes. My dad, he's got a lot of fear, I know, but enough pride inside, nothing let that show. My brother had a book he would hold with pride, a little red cover with a broken spine on the back. He hand wrote a quote inside: when the rich wage war, it's the poor who die. Meanwhile, the leader just talks away, stuttering and mumbling for nightly news to replay. The rest of the world watching at the end of the day, both scared and angry, like what did he say?
You have been chosen, yes, you, to discover for yourself what thousands have already experienced, the most life-changing health product in the world. It's called Royal Velvet, and there's nothing else like it. Royal Velvet users testify to receiving hundreds of benefits, from reversing the effects of aging to mental clarity, as well as noticeably improved sleep, energy, libido, overall health, and so much more, including saving lots of money. This is the real deal, that once-in-a-lifetime opportunity that you will regret if you don't act upon it. Honestly, there is an extremely limited amount of raw material, making it available only to a select few, a very select few. So find out why you have been chosen. Go to RoyalVelvetNow.com, click on the rinse icon in the upper right-hand corner for an incredible surprise. Oh yeah, if you place your order before we run out of them, you will receive the eye-popping but simple-to-read book that tells you how to live in divine health, and it's free. RoyalVelvetNow.com.
In 2007, one man, Mike Dillard, made 5 predictions which forecasted the 2008 economic crisis and the pending Eurozone collapse. 3 brand new, shocking, must-watch videos with predictions for the coming year. www.the3videos.com. Over the past year, Mike Dillard has helped thousands of ordinary people create and recover wealth by tapping into the black box investing strategies the big banks don't want you to know about. www.the3videos.com. As the European banking system implodes and governments collapse at breakneck speeds, the next 12 months will be the most anticipated and important months in modern human history. This will make 2008 look like a walk in the park. Everyone will be affected. Go to www.the3videos.com now. Learn how to prepare your family and prosper during the global financial collapse.
You're listening to the Rense Radio Network, nationwide and worldwide on the net and at rense.com.